Hello and welcome to Company Law 2 Debate 2021. Thank you for all the members for being here today. My name is Nisrina binti Razak as the chairperson for today's debate. Before we start our debate, allow me to introduce the members from each team. For the government team, we have the speakers from government teams are Ms. Syazwani, Ms. Zulaikha, and Ms. Akmal Wahida. And we have Ms. Liyana, Ms. Mahirah, and me myself as the researcher for the government team. For the opposition team, the speakers are Ms. Farah Insyirah, Ms. Amani, and Ms. Faqihah. And the researchers for opposition teams are Ms. Wahidah Kamilah, Ms. Hanani, and Ms. Ainur Syamimi. The topic for today's debate is this House believes that independent directors should be held accountable similar to non-executive director. We're going to start our debate with the first speaker from government team, then continue by the second speaker from government team. After that, we will have a Q&A session from the opposition for the government team. Then repeat the same process for the opposition team. Lastly, we will wrap up the debate with rebuttal and rebuttal from third speaker from each team. So without further ado, please me join in welcoming the first speaker from the government team, Ms. Nur Syazwani, to the floor to open the debate.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. Good morning to Ms. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of our debate today is an independent director should be accountable similar to a non-executive director. We, the affirmative team, believe that this statement is true. Today, as the first speaker, I will be talking about the nature of independent directors who are not truly independent. Independent directors have become part of corporate governance, which is created to prevent the growing incident of promoters enriching themselves through unfair means at the expense of the minority shareholders. According to Bursa Malaysia Listing Rules, Chapter 1, Para 1, an independent non-executive director is defined as a director who is independent of management and free from any business or other relationship which could interfere with the exercise of independent judgment or the ability to act in the best interest of the company. But in reality, who appoints this director? No doubt that shareholders appoint the independent directors. But if we see the process of selection of the independent directors, it is the existing directors who nominate the independent candidate for the post of the independent non-executive director, that too in consultation with the promoters, and the shareholders accept the nomination on the basis of the recommendation by the board. While regulations specify who cannot be independent directors, they are almost silent on qualification or experience to be the independent directors. The field is wide open for the appointment of people who can be described as home directors, which is friends, schoolmate, ex-colleague, relative, neighbor, etc. There are many independent directors who could evade responsibility for the company misconduct by feigning ignorance as they were non-executive, which led to the case of corporate scandal being increased. A former independent director, Jimmy Chin Kim Fyung, involved in 530 million and Smile accounting scandal, and Shukri Sheikh Abdul Tawab, also an independent director, for authorizing the release of a misleading statement to Bursa Malaysia in relation to the company unaudited revenue figures for the fourth quarter and full year of 2006. The former Deputy Prime Minister Tun Musa Hitam, the then independent non-executive chairman of Sime Darbi Berhad, received a huge backlash from the investors for the board failure to prevent a huge loss of 964 million from delays and cost overrun in several projects in 2010. More recently, the independent directors of Genting Malaysia Berhad had given the gaming company the green light to acquire a US-based casino operator that incurred a huge loss. While the 7 independent directors continue to sit on Genting Malaysia 9-member board, the stock is down 70% from its peak of RM3.80 registered on July 26. The company lost about 3.9 billion in market value during the period. It is no longer acceptable for independent directors to simply authorize or approve a resolution and not be accountable for their action. It is already hard to filter the elected independent directors. not holding them accountable for the action are unacceptable. Therefore, in assuring the credibility of independent directors, it is time to impose accountability towards the independent directors in any conduct that brought harm to the company. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Syazwani. Now, please welcome the second speaker from government team, Ms. Siti Zulaikha, to continue the case for their side.
Thank you, Ms. Chairperson. Good morning again to Ms. Chairperson, fellow teammates and the opposition team. The motion of today's debate is independent director should be accountable similar to non-executive director. We, the affirmative team, believe that this statement is indeed true. Everyone, our Prime Minister has already explained that independent directors should be accountable similar to non-executive director because independent directors are not really independent. So today, I will strengthen what my Prime Minister has explained earlier. I will support today's motion with the point that there is no clear distinction between roles and duties of these two categories of directors, and the independent director is in fact complementing the non-executive director in the company's management. Therefore, these two should have similar accountability. Ladies, most essentially, we have to understand that a non-executive director is a member of a company's board of directors who is not part of the executive team. According to Deloitte and many others, a non-executive director may either be an independent or dependent director, while independent directors in nature are always and definitely non-executive directors. From this, it is very clear and transparent to conclude or to say that an independent director is indeed a non-executive director and thus should be held accountable similarly to non-executive directors. All right, ladies, both the independent director and the non-executive director had the same role in the company and duties to each other. Although some of the duties might be different, but most of them are actually similar. First of all, according to the article from Shamsul Nahar Abdullah with the title of Board Composition, CEO Duality and Performance among Malaysian listed companies, independent directors do not involve in the day-to-day operation of the organization. And the same goes for the non-executive directors who are not full-time employees as compared to the executive directors who are the full-time employees and are involved in the day-to-day operation of the company. So from this, we can see the similarity of roles that these two categories of directors hold. In addition, ladies, the independent directors will not only having a say in a board meeting, but their representation is required most in the board committees. Board independence must ensure that good corporate governance is practiced by the companies. It means that when the board was independent, it would be more transparent and would disseminate information, which later results in improving the firm's liquidity. So to compare with the non-executive directors, we can observe some sort of similarities when their job is not only to run the company, but to keep a close eyes on the managers and the executive directors. They are also responsible or involved in the policy making and planning exercises which are conducted on the board meeting or during the board meeting. Secondly, the functions of both independent and non-executive directors are also similar to each other. The non-executive director acts as the advisor and as a succession planning and top management in the company. And the same goes for the independent director, who also has an important role to advise the company what the company is going through difficulties or financial problems. And according to the Tyson Report 2003, both of them had the same function as both of them also act as the advisor in the company. Third of all, both independent directors and non-executive directors involved in management of the company. Unlike the executive directors, they must always manage the conflict between their management responsibilities and their fiduciary duties as a director in the best interest of the company. But to compare with the non-executive and independent directors, these two, they play a vital role in providing independent judgment in all circumstances. And the key word that we have to understand here is independent judgment. So therefore, from this, we can see the similarity between the non-executive director and independent director, where both of them provide independent judgment in all circumstances as regard to the company. So, Ms. Chairperson and my fellow friends, it is best to conclude that the independent directors should be accountable similar to non-executive directors because both of them have similar roles and abilities, and in fact, the former complement the latter in the company's management. I believe that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zulaikha. Now we are going to open the debate up to questions from the opposition team.
My question is that, does independent director play a vital part to a public listed company?
Thank you for the question. To answer the question, yes, independent directors are crucial for public listed companies, particularly in relation to the membership of audit committees, who must all be non-executive directors, and a majority of them must be independent directors. They should make up at least 2/3 of directors in the audit committees of listed companies to oversee the financial reporting process.
Okay, the first speaker has mentioned that the independent directors mismanage the company at the expense of the minority shareholders. But Section 346 of the Company Act 2016 provides a form of protection to minority shareholder facing oppressive acts. So isn't that enough to hold that the independent directors are accountable for that action?
Thank you for the question. So under Section 346 subsection 1 of Company Act 2016, did provide that any member or debenture holder of a company, they may apply to the court for an order under this section to remedy in cases of oppression. However, misappropriation of company assets and other breaches of fiduciary duties not only affect the minority shareholders, it will affect the company as a whole. As in the case of Genting Malaysia Berhad that have been mentioned by Nur Syazwani before, the breach of duty by the independent directors has crashed the stock price by 70%, and it lost about 3.9 billion in market value during the period. Thank you for the questions and answers from both teams. Now we will continue our debate by welcoming the first speaker from the opposition team to open the case for their side.
Thank you to my fellow friends from the government and Ms. Chairperson. We as today's opposition stand on our ground that the independent director should not be accountable, similar to non-executive director. We have structured our case as follows. I, Farah Insyirah, as the first speaker, will be talking on the inner rift, fighting for the benefit between shareholders and stakeholders. Our second speaker, Ms. Amani, will elaborate on the fact that similar accountability will compromise the independence of independent directors. And our third speaker, Ms. Faqihah, will do the rebuttal. Ladies, before I proceed, the government has given out facts that the independent director have so many issues. What we argue is that these issues actually proves that independent directors should be maintained of its own liability accountability. Going to my point, independent directors' main purpose is not to have any material relationship with the company. This would allow them to give out fair and unbiased advice. With that being said, they are also shareholder elected, hence they act effectively to the interests of the shareholders. Meanwhile, non-executive directors act for the interests of the company and stakeholders, which is important to be protected because stakeholders' interests always be in conflict with the executive directors who hold C-level positions' interests. So merging these two accountabilities would definitely create chaos and imbalance, as each party with interest would wrestle to have a dominant position and have the outcome of management to be in their favor. In other words, it would create an internal rift between the management and also the advisory of the company, which then would prejudice the company's performance. Noting this fact in mind, with the independent directors having quite a disadvantage in planting their foot in the decision-making in the company's meetings, sharing the accountability would simply ease the non-executive directors to win this internal power control. With the independent directors have the crisis not being a good director due to the lack of skills and possibly being helped by the company's management team. Similar accountability would only aggravate the situation, as this impliedly forced the independent directors to be completely dependent on the non-executive directors, who are masters of this company's management. So personal authority, positional authority, information asymmetry, and cultural environment, these are the factors that usually hamper down independent directors from exercising their roles. So making the accountability similar between these two types of directors definitely is not a way to fix the current problem. Instead, it appears to be more of a taking advantage of the independent directors' current weaknesses and also completely cutting off their function. There's a reason why certain companies have prescribed number of independent directors. Their role is so important that a strategy to create a critical mass of the directors was made. This is for the sake of encouraging, support, and drive each other in the value creation and sustainability of their business. Eventually, we submit that the separating of accountability of independent directors and non-executive directors would be best, as no individual or small group dominates the board's decision-making. And also because a meticulous observation by each group could then be done to ensure a meticulous execution of the job scope and ensure each other to perform their utmost in line with the company's vision and purpose. So that marks our first argument. I rest my case.
I'd like to thank the first speaker from the opposition team. Welcome the second speaker from opposition team to continue the debate.
Thank you, Ms. Chairperson. Good morning to the respected Chairperson, honorable judges, members of the government team, and members of the floor. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. As the second speaker, I will continue my fellow speaker's argument. I will present one argument to oppose the contention that independent director should be accountable similar to non-executive director. But before that, I would like to concede to my fellow speaker from the government side that indeed, there are a few plausible reasons for an independent director to be held accountable similar to a non-executive director. However, we must remember that although in general sense, independent director and non-executive director are similar, but in terms of understanding, there is a thin line which differs them from one another, especially their different roles in the company. Therefore, my argument for today is that if independent director should be held accountable similar to a non-executive director, it will compromise the independence of independent director. Ladies, independent director and non-executive director, being different entities, have different roles in the company. In fact, Gary Brown, in his book titled The Independent Director, The Non-Executive Director's Guide to Effective Board Presence, elaborated that independent director reflect the true nature of the role and are just that they are independent. Hence, an independent director is an all-around independence in every way in terms of intellectual, financial, and political. Ladies, to an independent director, independence is essential in the sense that it allows a detached, dispassionate view of the company and its action. For instance, a non-executive director may be representing a major shareholder, but an independent director will generally have no other links with the company other than sitting on the board. Now, though non-executive directors are also not that close to the company, still it is part of their job and they have a much bigger role than independent directors in which they can choose to be independent or non-independent. Now, this differs from the nature of an independent director, whereby they have to get involved with the company, but not too involved, be close to the company, but not too close. It is undeniable that independent directors work closely with the executives, and are often interrelated with non-executive directors. But they are always aware of the line separating them from non-executive directors, and they know that crossing that line would compromise their independence. So ladies, as a final word, let me summarize my argument. Independent director is an independent entity which does not get involved closely with the company. They differ from non-executive director, which can either be independent or non-independent. If independent director should be held accountable similar to non-executive director, it will compromise their true independent nature and might even jeopardize the management of the company. Therefore, as a conclusion, independent director should not be held accountable similar to a non-executive director. With that, I end my argument. Thank you.
Thank you very much, speakers from the opposition team. Now, I would like to open the floor for questions from government team.
Okay, my question is, when the first speaker emphasized that the role of independent directors itself is so important for creating a critical mass to sustain the business, should the opposition team agree then to the main topic of our debate today? Because all in all, it is not about the fairness we're talking about. It is the responsibilities that the independent director have in the company as a whole. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Ms. Mahirah. But as we're talking about the responsibilities, then again, we need to view on the duty and functions of every director. Either it is the non-executive director and independent director. I think the government side also unanimously agreed that their degree of responsibility is also different. Since the independent directors, by definition, do not have a material relationship with the company, they cannot be subjected to be accountable for the management team. I think that's all.
Okay, the next question is, the second speaker mentioned about the difference in the roles of the independent directors and also the non-executive directors, and the issue of it will compromise or jeopardize the independence of the independent director. So what term that the independence of the independent director would be jeopardized? It is because the issue of responsibility here that should be highlighted, not the independence per se. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Liyana. I think the government side is lost on the fact mentioned by the second speaker before, that the independence of the independent directors is in the sense that they does not have any other links with the company other than sitting on the board. It's just as simple as that. They does not have material relationship with the company, which means they do not have shares in the company and neither part of its executive team nor involved in the day-to-day operations of the company. Their duty is just to include providing independent views to the board and representing shareholders on board. Thus, to say that they need to be accountable and talking about responsibilities here is not amounting to what they carry on in the board of the company itself, hence jeopardizing the independence of the independent directors. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions and answers. Now it's time to turn back to the third speaker from each team to rebut and conclude today's debate. Third speaker from the opposition team may begin his submission.
Thank you to Ms. Chairperson. Good morning again to Ms. Chairperson, members of the government team, and ladies. My name is Faqihah and I am the last speaker from the opposition team. We, the opposition team, do not agree with your team's statement that independent directors should be accountable similar to non-executive director. Our team strongly believe that independent directors should not be accountable similar to non-executive director. The first speaker of the government team has tried to tell you that the independent directors are not really independent. This is wrong because independent directors are independent and have different accountability than non-executive director. This can be supported by the Bursa Malaysia Listing Rules, Chapter 1.1.01. An independent director is one who has not engaged in any transaction with the company or is not presently a partner, director, or major shareholder of a firm. The rules above are clear that it is vital to maintain the independence of independent directors to allow them to give out fair and unbiased advice. In other words, it is to prevent the mismanagement in the company. Thus, an independent director cannot be made accountable similar to non-executive director. Ladies, the second affirmative speaker further argued that there is no clear distinction of roles and duties between independent director and non-executive director. This is wrong also because although both independent director and non-executive director are often depicted as a similar entity with similar job scope, in practice and in understanding, they have different roles and duties in the company's management. In Malaysia, they are often depicted as different entities, although their job scope can be quite similar. Independent directors are basically independent and cannot become non-independent, whereas non-executive director can be both, which is independent and non-independent. This shows that non-executive directors have a wider scope of duties than independent director. If independent director were to be held accountable similar to non-executive director, they might lose their natural title and purpose as an independent director. From here, Ms. Chairperson, members of the government team and ladies, with our evaluations and thorough discussion, we have proved to you again and again that independent director should not be accountable similar to non-executive director. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Faqihah. Now let's welcome the third speaker from the government team to wrap up the debate.
Good morning, Ms. Chairperson and all beautiful ladies here. I am Akmal Wahida, the third speaker from the government side. The notion from my team is the independent directors should be accountable similar to the non-executive director. We, the government team, believe that this statement is true. I will start by rebutting the first and the second speaker's point of the opposition team, where I believe that they have failed to provide any credible authority to support their argument. The first speaker has stated that the inner rift between the independent directors and the non-executive director may arise if both of them bear the same accountability. She believed that sharing the accountability would simply ease the non-executive directors to win the internal rift, and further contended that independent directors having the crisis of not being a good directors due to the lack of skill and possibly being held by the company's management team. I am disagree with her as I refer the conference paper done by Sharifah Fatihah and Mami Yanti Abdullah from UITM. The independent directors is in fact complementing the role of the non-executive directors. Despite the status of the independent directors as the outside directors, they actually able to bring the external business expertise to the board. Even though they're not having any right to the management of the companies, the independent directors possess diverse experience and knowledge that led to various changes in the organization. This, the contention of the independent directors' skills lacking, the independent directors' lack of skills is totally a false statement. Next, the second opposition team views that putting similar accountability between independent directors and non-independent directors will be compromised the status of the independence director. However, in my view, the issues of the independence directors have no correlation with their accountability because it is their nature to provide independent judgment on the board. If both independent director and non-executive director acted beyond their powers and misused for its personal interest, both types of directors cannot escape from the punishment. Both must be accountable for their actions as both share slightly same duties and role, and they should be subjected to similar punishments. Hence, Ms. Chairperson and all ladies, I would like to reiterate the government's point, which are independent directors are not really independent, and there is no clear distinction between roles and duties of the two categories of independent directors and non-independent directors, where both of them in fact complementing each other. This is because the non-executive and independent directors plays a vital role in providing independent judgment for the companies. Independent directors provide independent views and independent thinking to the board. Meanwhile, non-executive directors give independent judgment to bear on the issues of strategy, performance, including key appointment and standards of conduct. So from this, we can see that the similarity between these type of director. Hence, we from the affirmative side believe that in order to ensure efficiency within the company, making the independent director board to hold the same responsibility as a non-executive directors is an inevitably necessary. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wahidah, for the conclusion. With that, end our memorable debate for today. Thank you for all the speakers from each team for the great debate. Thank you very much.